What's up, everybody? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and on this channel, we break down the trials and cases you care most about so you can understand how the American civil and criminal justice system works. And we try to make sure you understand what your rights are in every situation, which is why we try to walk you through the entire legal process while also answering your insightful questions along the way. And while it's not legal advice, it's always exciting. So buckle up for another episode of The Lawyer You Know. What's up, everybody? We're back at it today after another eventful day for Alec Murdaugh, for everyone involved, for his lawyers, for this judge. He actually got some rulings to go his way just to have them overturned at a later time. We'll talk about whether or not we think that was some kind of strategy. And we are going to break down the testimony today. We're going to focus on one thing in particular, but I think there were really two main components to the entirety of the evidence that was presented by the state today. And let's get right to it after you guys have had a chance to hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already, and like the video before we get started so that you don't forget to do that later. So we finally got to talk to Chief Investigator Owen, who we've heard so much about throughout the entirety of the trial, and I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for him to take the stand and see how he was going to answer for how poor the investigation was, the evidence gathering, the execution of the search warrants, the questioning, the preservation of evidence, the preservation of the scene. I couldn't wait to get to that. And oh boy, we got to it. But you know when we didn't get to it is on direct examination. The prosecutor barely asked about the investigation, about the crime scene, about the search warrants, about what they found, about what they did, about how they were pointed in certain directions, and how the steps were taken in an investigation. Usually, when you hear from the lead investigator, they wrap it all together. They tie a bow on it. They give you the timeline from beginning to end, everything they did in this investigation to catch and prove that that is the person who committed this crime sitting over there at defense table. This is the guy. Everybody's been asking, oh, I hope the state has more. I hope they're going to, bring it home. This is when they were supposed to close. They were actually supposed to close a week ago, but today was the new day they were supposed to finish their case in chief. So I would be shocked if they have some smoking gun or big piece of evidence coming. I think this is it, people. My potential juror members here with me, I think this is it. Now, we know we're going to have some roadside incident, Cousin Eddie potentially, law enforcement talking about the roadside incident, but I do not think that there is much of anything left that proves he committed this crime on June 6th. A lot of proof he committed financial crimes and a lot of proof he committed fraud here with Cousin Eddie coming up, but not much to prove murder, in my opinion. Now, somebody did bring it to my attention that I've been calling Alec Murdaugh a scumbag and other not so nice names throughout the process to try and explain how I do feel about him as a person, even though I don't feel like the state has proven he's committed these crimes. They reminded me that that's not exactly the nicest way or most graceful way to speak about somebody. So I will take that to heart and do my best to not do that. I think he's made a lot of mistakes, but he was an addict. And he has admitted some of his mistakes, at least, even if he hasn't pled guilty. It seems like he's admitted them and apologized to a lot of people, as we've seen throughout this trial. So I will try to give him a little bit more grace than maybe I have in the past. But let's get back to what the investigator was talking about. So this prosecutor is by far my least favorite. He walks up to the investigator, shakes his hand, asks him if that's how he shook Alec Murdaugh's hand. I don't like that style. You guys can let me know if you do. They talk about the white shirt, green shorts, bright tennis shoes when he shows up, no stains, normal clean shoes. How he was immediately telling him stories about the boat case, how it could have been that. Mr. Rowe with the weird racist stories and how that piqued his interest. And he went and investigated that. Mr. Rowe had an alibi. Talk a lot about how Alex Murdaugh lied about this and that, which we kind of know. And Alex Murdaugh wanted additional interviews. He called 5 to 6 times with wanting updates on the case, which this is the thing I don't like. I don't like arguing both sides of the same argument. So he called so many times that he was too interested. He was too interested in this case, so he must have done it. But yet then they also have testimony that he cared more about clearing Paul's name. He didn't care about catching this killer. He didn't care enough about this case. He was back focused on the boat case. So I do think that's kind of arguing both sides of this, but everything they try to make seem like he must be the killer. So no guns found by Paul or Maggie. And then we get to the interview. And I said there were two main parts of the trial today, of the 8 or 9 hours or whatever we had. Part number 1 was this interview, which seemed like it went on for hours. And part number 2 was the cross-examination of this witness by Jim Griffin. And I kept going back and forth on which I wanted to play. I don't have time to play both. And I felt like as I watched this interview, there was a lot of repetition and a lot of it could be summarized. And I think that playing the Jimmy G cross gives us the full outlook of the defense's case. And it absolutely gives reasonable doubt, other very reasonable and plausible explanations. And I think it will be more beneficial for us to listen to that to get the full context of this case than yet more inconsistencies, or even if you want to call them lies, I'm fine with that from Alex Murdaugh, which we're going to summarize some of them here. First off, it was interesting how Fleming was there and said he was his friend, but also his lawyer, which to me goes to the argument that the defense had before, where all these people around him, yeah, they were friends, but they're also lawyers, and they were kind of, Toy Bird says 100% guilty, disagree with you. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. And there may be some jurors that think that. And somebody said, let me guess, show the cross because it makes him look less guilty, Tina said with her eyes rolling. Listen, if you don't want to watch the cross, I understand. I think the cross is more helpful to the case, to understanding the case as a whole, versus this interview, which has a ton of repetition. Okay? So I understand. If you don't agree with that, that's fine. I got to try to pick what I think is going to give us the best legal angles and explanation of what's going on in the case. So throughout this interview, he has a friend who's acting as his lawyer, says, am I mistaken? Or were you going to give us information? Or are you asking him for information? Is he still a suspect? And it seems like throughout the process, it's like, oh yeah, we're trying to make you not a suspect. But then we find out there was never, ever any other suspect. And it was always Alex Murdaugh. And they could never put anybody else in the scene. So they were like, okay, it's got to be him. They talked about the timeline again, when he got to the office, when he got home, how it had to be this long because he feels like he was driving around with Paul, messing around for an hour, 2 hours. It had to be more than an hour. Then Maggie came home. They had supper together that Blanca made. And then he goes to his mom's house. He wasn't with them for an hour and a half to 2 hours, which would make it, based on the time he called 911, around 7:30 or 8. We know that's not true. We know that's an absolute lie. He talked about how he was first confronted with the picture with the button down and the khakis. Like, that's not what you were wearing when we came. And Alec didn't really have an answer. He's like, I must have changed. I don't know when I changed. I thought I changed before that. I thought I changed before I was, messing around with Paul, but I guess I didn't. But all of this to me, and these are lies, and these are important factors and things to point out, absolutely, and they could point towards guilt, but you have to prove it. And that's the issue I have with this case. If you want to tell me he hid those clothes, prove to me that those clothes weren't in his closet that day. But you didn't look for them. You never searched for them. You never confirmed they were gone, but that's the argument you want to make to this jury now. He moved. He didn't stay there anymore. He was living here, there, and everywhere. Was getting rid of clothes and buying new clothes, losing weight, going to rehab. So the clothes might not have been there in September, But in June, when you had these search warrants, you never even looked for these clothes. Even after this interview in August, I believe it was, when you knew this existed, you never looked for those clothes. You never tried to test any other clothes but the white shirt and the green shorts. And when you tested them, you at first had an expert telling you there was blood spatter on them. But we'll get to that in the cross. Why? And this was some of the stuff I thought was really interesting, that when it comes down to it, you all are asking very good questions. And I don't just say that to blow smoke, because you all asked a ton of these questions, including this one that I never really even thought about it because I don't feel like it was necessary, but a lot of you did. And in this interview, he was asked, why didn't you go check on Maggie after she didn't respond to your text and you were going to your mom's, especially if that was the reason, like she was coming? And he said, I don't remember having plans that night that she was going to ride with me. He didn't have a good answer. It wasn't like, oh, that was normal, I would just go and come back or something like that. And then he was at his mom's for 45 to an hour, which is a much bigger difference than 30 to 45, and more than double what he was actually there 21 minutes. Because I think 30 to 45 minutes, 30 minutes is pretty close to 21. But when you say 45 to an hour, that's a big difference. And I think regardless of whether he did it or not, he was definitely trying to create a better alibi than existed. I think he knew he was a suspect and he wanted to eliminate himself as a suspect regardless as to whether or not he did it. And I think that's why he lied. And if he did it, he's trying to create this alibi, no doubt. If he didn't do it, I think he is still playing lawyer and trying to create an alibi that doesn't exist. He said things like, I know more than I did a few weeks ago. He thought he hadn't seen the 300 blackouts since March. He was starting to ask questions like, did they suffer? How long from one shot to the other? Who was killed first? Was it one person, two people, three people? And then they also did start talking about, should they hire investigators? Should they talk to people? They don't want to step on the police's toes, which to me goes against a lot of the evidence they're saying, like he was doing nothing. He didn't care. Why wasn't he trying to figure out who killed them? Why wasn't he asking people questions? Why wasn't there a bigger reward? And he kept saying, yes, there was a reward, only $100,000, and it did have an expiration on it. So saying like the reward was just for show, basically. But I got to be honest, he seems very, very, very cooperative. His friend's basically telling him, I don't think we should really talk here. He's like, no, I want to. So that was interesting. I do want to play just two questions here from this interview. And you may know what two questions it is, so that you all can see his reaction and judge what you think when he is asked the ultimate question.
And I appreciate it.
And I'll call the Bransteaders and see if they want to meet. Maybe get Marion up there at the same time so I can just meet them all together. Does Marion, I know they live on Wadmalaw, does Marion work?
No, she doesn't work. And they're kind of between Wadmalaw and, they're residents of the state of Florida, but they're here as much as they're in Greenville a lot right now.
Yeah, because you're trying to
the baby. That's right. Okay. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. He says, I just have two questions for you.
Just a few more questions.
Okay.
Did you kill Maggie?
No. Did I kill my wife?
Yes, sir.
No, David.
Do you know who did?
No, I do not know who did.
Did you kill Paul?
No, I did not kill Paul.
Do you know who did?
No, sir, I do not know who did. Do you think I killed Maggie?
That's a yes.
I have to go where the evidence and the facts.
That's a yes from a cop, but he says, I got to go where the evidence and the facts take me.
I understand that. And you think I killed Paul?
I have to go where the evidence and the facts take me, and I don't have anything that points to anybody else at this time.
So does that mean that I am a suspect?
You were still in, like I told Corey earlier, you were still in this. With everything that we've talked about, with the family guns, the ammunition, nobody else's DNA. I have to put my beliefs aside and go with the facts.
Talk to Mr. Griffin, there's one sentence after that before we
All
get
right.
back to
So that was the gist of direct. And I think they did get a lot of inconsistencies out, definitely lied throughout that third interview. But this cross, I know people are going to hate me for it. I've already seen it, was really good. It sets out so much reasonable doubt, so many alternative theories that the evidence actually points to, getting so many statements out without having to call Alec Murdaugh to the stand. And I think that it hits every key component you want during cross-examination. So all we have besides this cross to watch is the judges flipping on his ruling, because at a certain point, the judge said the side of the road stuff is not coming in. It's too remote. It's after the fact. It doesn't prove motive. It's not coming in. It is a bridge too far, which I think is absolutely correct. I don't think he said it was more prejudicial than probative, but I think it is. I think the prejudice severely outweighs any probative value that it may have. So I think I got to give the judge kudos. I think he made the absolute right call by not letting that roadside stuff in. And I thought Harpootlian actually made a pretty good argument that it was motive potentially or connected to the financial crimes, really, to try to get rid of them, versus this one. It literally had nothing to do with this. But we know that changed, and we will watch part of the cross where the judge says that the door was open to it and now it will be allowed in. But we're going to watch this. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to explain. I'll pause it. I'll answer questions. I'll put some of your comments up about if you think he's guilty or not guilty, or what you think has been proven or hasn't, or what you think of this witness. I'll put some of those up as well. And we'll continue the rest of our discussion mostly centered around this cross, which I think if after this cross you think he is guilty and you think he did it, then that is probably going to be your vote at the end of the case. That would be my guess. If you still feel like he's not guilty at this point, your vote could still change, but I think this is going to give you a lot of ammunition as we go back in the jury room to discuss it. When everybody closes, we will have a discussion as if we are a jury. What do we think? Why do we think it? We'll talk about the strongest pieces of evidence, the weakest pieces of evidence, where the holes are. Is there reasonable doubt? We are going to do that this trial. We haven't really done it like that before, but we are going to have our own little, maybe not so little as there are 7,000 people in here, jury room where we discuss it. We're not going to yell at each other. We're not going to walk out. We're going to sit here and discuss it together. And we're doing what, they shouldn't be doing, which is kind of discussing where we stand throughout the trial. But this was a big, big point to me. All right, here we go. And of course, 1.5.
To conclude that Paul and Maggie were murdered sometime between 8:50 p.m. on June the 7th and 9:06 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And
So he starts out with the timeline, which we've been talking. He talked a little bit about how Alec was in the inside since the 911 call, obviously, because he's the one that called. He was the first one to see him. He was the last one with him. So he obviously starts out in there automatically. He was the closest one to him. But then we get to the good part where he starts from the timeline. And that's where we've started a lot of our discussions that a lot of you haven't liked. And I understand that, but I think we come here to discuss this stuff. And that timeline just starts out a not impossible, but unlikely scenario that he did all of this by himself and was able to cover it up, stash this stuff, clean up, and do all of this by himself with 2 weapons and nobody being around to see him, hear him, or anything like that. So that's why he starts with the timeline, and then he continues from there.
whoever murdered Maggie and Paul would, at a minimum, have in their possession an AR-15 style assault rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun, correct?
Not unless they got rid of it.
Well, the moment they were murdered,
Yes.
someone had to have, one person or 2 people had to have murder weapons, right?
Yes.
Paul was murdered with a 12-gauge, right?
Yes, sir.
You would agree then that the murderer had a 12-gauge shotgun.
Yes.
You would agree that the murderer had some AR-15 style assault weapon that killed Maggie, right?
Yes, sir.
And you would agree at the time they were murdered, they would have those weapons.
Yes.
And would you agree that whoever murdered Maggie and Paul would likely have blood and biological material on them following the shotgun blast that essentially blew Paul's brains out of his head?
They would have some, yes.
And on the night of June the 7th, you said it was after midnight, so it would be early morning hours, 1 a.m. on June the 8th, you interviewed Alec and he told you that he had left Moselle sometime between 9 and 9:10 to check on his mother. Is that right?
That is correct.
So if Alex was the perpetrator, as alleged, he would have had to brutally murder his wife and son sometime after 8:50 p.m. and 9:06, dispose of the murder weapons either somewhere on the Moselle property, within the Moselle residence, along the drive to Alameda, or at his mother's residence or property at Alameda. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's really important. And I want to make sure you caught it. Jim Griffin has just given the lead investigator 4 scenarios or 5 scenarios. These are the only scenarios that are even possible based on the evidence. He committed these crimes with 2 different guns within 16 minutes and got rid of all of the evidence either at Moselle or on the drive to his parents' house or at his parents' house, right? Correct. Once you lock that in, now you prove how unlikely it is that any of those scenarios are true. And he goes one by one. You search this place, right? You have the General Motors information. He did not stop on the way to Alameda. And then you never even searched Alameda. So to me, he has proven the 3 ways this could have happened. And he has proven not how it happened or that they didn't happen, because that's not the defense's job. What he has proven is the state and this investigator did nothing, got no evidence to prove any of those 3 scenarios beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the way you got to look at it, in my opinion, and how the law is set up. Tish, I hope you're wearing it tonight. Glad you got it.
Now, immediately when law enforcement arrived, they secured the immediate murder scene.
That is my understanding, yes.
Down at Kennels. And they eventually thoroughly searched the Moselle residence. There was a search of the Moselle residence the next day, correct?
That is correct.
You know what time that was? Early afternoon, late morning?
That's approximate time, yes.
And no murder weapons were found in the residence, is that correct?
So he's knocked off scenario number 1. He hit him at Moselle. That's scenario number 1, but you guys searched it thoroughly the very next morning. And you didn't find anything. So we can knock that one off. You didn't prove that. And again, I'm not saying defense is proving beyond a reasonable doubt that it didn't happen, because that's not their job, but they're showing how the state and specifically SLED can't prove any of these scenarios.
That is correct.
And no murder weapons were found on the property at Moselle, is that correct?
That is correct.
And was a search of the route between Moselle and Alameda ever done?
It wasn't walked from Moselle to Alameda, but it was driven several times.
So they didn't even bother to walk a 16-minute drive or whatever it was. I don't know. What's that? An hour walk, hour and a half walk. It wasn't worth it to them to walk to see anywhere he could have potentially stashed the gun or thrown the gun or the clothes or how to get rid of this stuff, even though there was, nothing in the car to make you think that he was full of blood or bringing murder weapons in the car. But they didn't even do that.
And you didn't find any weapons there, correct?
No, sir.
And was a search of the waterways along the route done between Moselle and Alameda?
Most waterways, yes.
Excuse me?
Most waterways, I don't know if every single one was searched, but there were several waterways searched.
Now we know from the General Motors OnStar data that was delivered during the middle of this trial that Alec did not stop from the moment he left Moselle to drive to Alameda. Is that correct?
Correct.
You've reviewed that?
Yes.
So then he couldn't have stashed him there. I mean, that actually is proving that he didn't do anything on the way, because he didn't stop his car. I guess he could have thrown him out the window while he was driving. So I guess there is that. But why didn't they find him or search when they were searching for it, when they drove it without walking it? Again, a decision they made. And then he asked him if they search all these waterways. And it's like this cop, I think they have a feeling they could win based on just the generally bad guy rule, because he says, well, I know we searched some waterways. I can't say that we searched all of them. So he would rather admit that they did not unturn every stone than say, yes, we searched every waterway and didn't find it. It's like they're picking which ineffective investigation they want to go with.
There's no detours along the way, correct?
No, sir.
and you never searched the Alameda property for any signs of murder evidence, guns, bloody clothes, or anything until well after sometime in mid to late September. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I will tell you, I mean, makes me want, I mean, I agree with Lulu here. That makes me want to fall out of my chair. Like, you should be appalled at that in our country, that he tells them his alibi. He was creating his alibi. Well, why didn't you look into his alibi by going and looking at the house he said he was at for an hour right afterwards? Like, that is preposterous. And there are a lot of people with comments. I think Sled was in on it. I think they're trying to throw it. That's a good explanation because I can't understand it otherwise. How it's possible that they wouldn't go search Alameda. And I have actually filed motions in this case, and it's interesting. I don't know if the defense did this. I have filed motions that the other side should not even be allowed to argue that he ditched the gun or ditched the clothes because there's no evidence of it. The only evidence that they want to say he ditched this stuff is that it's not there. They didn't find it anywhere. They didn't find any evidence of him transporting it. They didn't find any evidence of him burying it or cleaning it off or literally anything. And if you want to point to that brownish red matter in the hosed off water by the kennels, no, they didn't even test that for human blood. I don't even think they should have been able to argue that he ditched this stuff because that's an argument based on facts, not in evidence. And I know everybody's going to be appalled by that, but literally we've done stuff like that where we've kept stuff out where there's actually no evidence of it. You want to argue because it's the only way you can explain away the deficiencies in your case and the lack of investigation here. But what proof do they have that he ditched any of this stuff? The fact that the guns aren't there doesn't mean that he ditched them. Now, it's plausible and reasonable to make an inference there and argue that. So that's how it's getting in. So I understand that. I'm not saying it's wrong that they were able to. I would have probably filed a motion limiting and lost, trying to keep them from that. Because they're really, to me, they're making an argument based on their lack of investigation. They could have done more to determine if that was actually true, and they just didn't.
You could have searched Alameda that night, correct?
If I had probable cause to, yes, sir.
Well, was anybody denying consent to search? When I say anybody, Alec Murdaugh gave you carte blanche consent to search anywhere in those properties, did he
Yes,
not?
yes, he did.
And John Marvin was assisting Sled and facilitating.
So on redirect, they say, did you have a search warrant for Alameda? Did anybody tell you could go search Alameda? And he says, no, as if that proves anything. That's a joke. And that's what's shown with all these police interviews. If he did it or not, maybe he tried to commit the perfect crime. Maybe he thought he had everyone fooled. Maybe he was being cocky. He absolutely would have let him go search Alameda that night. If not, it would have flipped his whole story on its head that he was trying to be cooperative. I almost just knocked over my water because I talk with my hands so much. But please, what do you guys think? Do you think Alec Murdaugh would have let him search Alameda, his parents' house that night? Let me know in the chat.
Facilitating wherever you wanted to look. Wasn't he doing that?
He was, but the night of June 7th, even though Alec was in the circle, basically by default because of his close relationship with the victims and finding them, I did not consider him the main suspect or the only suspect because I had no probable cause and no evidence to support that he killed his wife and son.
Well, if a thorough, tight, quick, prompt investigation had been taken from the Moselle property, the route to Alameda, and the Alameda property, that could have possibly excluded Alec from the circle, couldn't it? If you found no evidence of guns, bloody clothes, or anything, right?
If you know what you're looking for and where to look, and have some type of information that would lead you to that area, yes.
Like
And
an
that opportunity
alibi?
was missed.
Like the only suspect telling you that's where he went right after the time of murder?
Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't say it was missed because it wasn't known about. Other than several hours later when we get to the bodies and there are no weapons found, it wasn't until the casings and the shot shells were recovered that I actually knew what the calibers were.
Okay. It's pretty clear the night of the murders, Colleton County Sheriff's deputies on the scene recognized the shell casings as being 300 blackouts, correct?
That is what they told me, but I want to verify for myself.
Right. And by 6, 7, 8 o'clock the next morning on June 8th, Rogan Gibson had been interviewed where he said, I heard Alec Murdaugh's voice in the background. Right.
Yes, sir.
And Alec had told you that he left Moselle and gone to Alameda, right?
Yes.
And so as of the late morning of June the 8th, Well, let me back up. That first interview with Alec, you state that he did not inform you that he was down at the kennels after dinner, right?
That is correct. He
And
said
you get information from Rogan Gibson that contradicted that.
yes.
And Alec Murdaugh is in the middle of the circle on the morning.
So he already knew about that contradiction. So why didn't you do more? And Kuda, I think that's a good bet.
Bring up June the 8th.
Well, I still needed to build a timeline because speaking with Alec, he was giving me some times, and I needed to build that timeline. And not having that, coupled with Rogan's statement that he was 100% sure he was on the phone with Paul. He was 100% sure they heard Maggie. He was only 99% sure, even though it's a great percentage. He said he was 99% sure it was Alec. I needed to gather some more information before I just go back and confront Alec on that.
Sure. Well, tell me what the thought process was behind searching the Moselle residence. What were you looking for?
Any types of ammunition. It was 300 blackout. We had the 12 gauge shot shells. We know that it's hunting goes on out there of all types. In the shed, there was some additional ammunition that was in a bucket. Needed to see what type of ammunition and firearms were in the house to try to get documentation of what was missing, what was there.
And why was Agent McAllister looking in the tubs and in the drains for guns?
Why was she?
Yeah.
You'll have to ask her. I wasn't there.
I mean, it's obvious that you were searching to see if there any evidence of blood in the house. You want to do that, right?
Yes.
Because Alec's in the circle and he'd been to the house.
Yes, sir.
Alec's in the circle and he'd been to Alameda, right?
Yes, sir.
And no one went to Alameda to look for guns or blood.
See, it's like he almost doesn't want to admit that they were doing a full search because they didn't find anything. It's almost better to let the prosecutors just argue that what SLED missed is the proof we need. He definitely cleaned off, even though we have no evidence he cleaned off anywhere. Literally no evidence. For everybody that says he's guilty because he lied, okay, that's your prerogative. You can base it off one fact if you want to. Absolutely. Every juror has a vote. But do you actually think there's evidence that he cleaned off? What is the evidence that he cleaned off after doing this? I'm honestly interested. Like, if we were going to discuss this, and again, a lot of this is going to happen when the jury is deliberating. We're going to have an interesting time discussing it.
Blood or bloody clothes, did they?
Not that day, no, sir.
Would you agree that was an opportunity missed?
For Almeida, yes.
Now, we talked about the murder weapons. You would expect that the murder weapons would also have on them, at least the shotgun, the 12 gauge that killed Paul, would have some biological material, blood on the shotgun. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
And the assault weapon and the shotgun would have GSR on it, would it not?
Yes.
And if someone was transporting shotgun with blood on it and a rifle with GSR on it, and you got their vehicle, you would look for signs of that in the vehicle, would you not?
Yes.
And that was done here, was it not?
It was done on the Suburban and the Mercedes, yes.
Excuse me?
It was done on the Suburban and the Mercedes, yes.
Yeah. And so there's nothing in the Suburban. There's no blood in the back where people would possibly carry guns. And when I say the back, I'm the back.
Cargo area, yes.
Yeah. There's no evidence of blood back there, right?
No, sir.
No evidence of GSR back there, was there?
No, sir.
There's no evidence of blood or GSR in the second or third seats, correct?
No, sir.
And the only GSR found in the Suburban was one speck on a seatbelt buckle, right?
That is correct.
And there was one drip of blood confirmed on the steering wheel that comes back with Maggie's DNA. Is that right?
Yes.
And we know from the General Motors stuff we just got during the trial that Suburban never went down to the kennels until after Alec came back from Alameda. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So can we rule out that Alec put any guns from the murder in the back of the Suburban?
Unless it was wrapped in something.
Well, that's a great point because that's the prosecution's theory. So how is Griffin going to react to this? Right? But he agreed basically with that answer that he didn't just take them and throw them in there. So if he did take them, they had to be wrapped in something.
And have you found anything it was wrapped in?
We have a blue raincoat that has numerous particles of GSR in it.
Let's talk about that blue raincoat for a second. You developed information about a blue tarp from interviewing or SLED agents interviewing Shelley Smith. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you're doing a search sometime in September at Alameda for this blue tarp, you find a blue rain jacket rolled up in a closet, right?
I believe it was balled up. Yes, sir.
You're right, Andrea.
And you were there during the search, right?
Yes, sir.
And you also found a tarp somewhere else on the property, right? Excuse me, in the attic or somewhere.
Yes, sir. It was on the second floor, folded up in a tote in a closet with other things on top of the tote.
And so this blue rain jacket, you showed it to Shelley Smith there and you say, is this what you're talking about?
I showed her a picture.
You showed a picture to Shelley Smith?
I showed a picture to Shelley Smith to ask her if it was the similar color.
And when did you show Shelley Smith that picture?
I believe it was last month.
Last month. Well, so was it during trial?
No, sir.
Is it preparing for trial?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. But you'd not shown her that before Alec Murdaugh had been indicted for murder, right?
No, sir.
But you had shown that blue rain jacket to a number of people to see if they recognized it.
I showed it to family members to see if they recognized it as being Alec, Maggie, Paul's, Buster's, or anybody else in the family.
And not a single family member recognized that blue rain jacket.
No, they did not.
And Shelley Smith described the tarp as she saw it laying out on Ms. Libby's retirement rocking chair, and it was a tarp, right?
And she told me that it was a blue vinyl type looking tarp, type material. And that Alec came in and it was folded up or balled up in his arms. And then after he left, she noticed it laying on the chair.
And so you showed her a picture of this balled up rain jacket and said, "Is it this color?" Is that what you did?
I asked her, I knew she wasn't going to be able to identify the raincoat because the picture I showed her was it from our lab where it's opened up and spread out. And she's telling me that it was balled up. So I knew she's not going to be able to identify.
Just to address this comment, if you've ever seen 12 Angry Men, it doesn't take a chat room to convince somebody of something. They will be discussing it. There will be disagreements, is my guess.
The raincoat, but she can at least identify or attempt to identify the color.
I mean, you read reports of her interview and probably saw her entire interview by video, did you not?
Yes.
And you understand that she said she saw that thing 2 times, right?
I don't recall that.
You don't recall her?
Well, the 2 times with Alec coming in with it and then seeing it on the chair.
Yeah. And it wasn't balled up when she saw it on the chair. That's not the report you received, right?
No, but it also wasn't spread out, opened up like it was in the picture that I showed her.
She didn't tell you it was spread out, opened up on the retirement chair?
She told me it was laid across the chair is the information that I received.
It wasn't balled up though, right?
No, sir.
Yeah, you didn't show a picture of the rain jacket, right?
I did show her a picture of the rain jacket.
As balled up.
No, sir.
You showed a picture of the rain jacket that was open.
I believe I showed, I'm not sure. I know I showed her the picture of it opened up to see if she recognized the color.
Okay. I think the jury will remember what she testified about, but
Sustained.
and you know that
That's improper, but whatever. They both sides have been doing stuff like that. That's annoying, but
that rain jacket did not have any blood. I mean, it tested for blood. There's no blood on it, right?
I'm aware of that, yes, sir.
And if someone had wrapped up shotgun killing Paul in that rain jacket, you expect to find blood, would you not?
At least DNA, yes.
Well, there's no
You
DNA
would
either,
think,
right?
yes.
So no DNA and no blood in that rain jacket, right?
There's no DNA, yes.
And you know it was tested with LCD, and there was no presumptive sign of blood there, right?
Correct.
so he had him agree. Okay. Another important thing here. He had him agree that there would be blood and biological matter and GSR on these guns and on Alec Murdaugh's person. So if they were wrapped in this blue tarp / raincoat, how did no DNA or blood get on that raincoat? He cleaned the guns first, I guess, but the GSR was transferred, they're saying. Carolina said, please help me understand how omitting that he was at the kennels is evidence he committed murder. It's character evidence, I think, which is improper to prove murder with it, if you're not catching my drift. But, I mean, some jurors are going to take one piece like that and they're going to convict, and that's the jury system. But it's not enough for me. But I don't matter. I'm not a juror on this case.
So are you willing to agree that it doesn't look like that rain jacket was used to carry any murder weapons on the night of June the 7th?
They had weapons in them. I would believe that they had weapons in them at some time because there was GSR on them.
Yeah. And we don't know if that was 5 years ago.
And Mary Lee, we're going to get to the fact that, do some of his lies even matter? Do some of his lies even make a difference, whether what he said was true or false within the timeline? Because I think some of them don't even matter.
3 years ago, 1 year ago, do we?
Correct.
We do know from folks working on the investigation that you're leading, there's no blood or no DNA in that rain jacket.
Correct.
And you know from your experience that there would be blood on the shotgun, and if you're wrapping it up in that jacket, you're going to have blood on the jacket, right?
Well, you would believe that there would be blood or DNA on the barrel of the shotgun, but until you actually have it to test it, I can't sit here and say, yes, it would be there.
Okay.
So now he's backtracking a little. Well, you would think it would be there, but if you don't have it, you can't test it. And once again, because of our bad investigation and search warrant execution, we don't have it, so we couldn't test it. Therefore, in order to fit in with our case, we're going to say it's okay that there was no DNA and blood. That's still the raincoat that he wrapped up the guns with that had a lot of GSR on them, but no blood or DNA or biological material at all. I just can't buy that. I have seen so many trials, though, Like, I've seen so many criminal trials, so I know what actual good investigations and locked in evidence looks like to prove stuff like this. And this ain't it. A lot of people have feelings about Alec Murdaugh. I did too before this trial started. So I understand and I don't condemn you for it. But this is not what it's supposed to look like in our country. God forbid this was someone you knew or loved and, you know, they just got steamrolled with something like this. Even if they had made a lot of mistakes in the past, even if they were a jerk or a bad person.
And we know it wasn't cleaned off because if it had been washed off, the GSR would have been washed off, correct?
If they wipe the exterior of the barrel for blood or DNA, but it still doesn't wipe off the particles that are in the barrel that could fall down and out.
All right. And let's talk about washdown. Did you notice any wet spots in the back of the Suburban?
No, sir.
You notice any wet spots in the back seat of the Suburban?
No, sir.
It looked like the Suburban, anything wet had been placed in the Suburban.
No, sir.
And if Alec Murdaugh had cleaned up after committing these horrendous murders, wouldn't you expect to find some trace evidence of blood somewhere in the house, if that's where it occurred?
If he cleaned up in the house, yes.
And did you find any trace evidence of blood in the house indicated Alec had cleaned up?
If he cleaned up in the house, no.
That's a
The answer
no.
is no, you didn't find any trace evidence of blood in the house. Is that correct?
No, sir.
That's not correct.
There was no trace evidence of blood found in the house, no.
Thank you. Did you find any blood on the carpet, floors, or anywhere throughout the house?
No, sir.
Myra, I think this would have been better. Even if it was an unknown co-conspirator, I still feel like it would have made more sense.
Let's talk about Alec's clothes. On July 7th, 2021, you obtained a Snapchat video of Alex in khakis and this short sleeve dress shirt taken by Paul sometime on June the 7th. Is that correct?
I did not receive it on June the 7th, but I did receive it, yes.
You have noticed when you received it?
There was a Snapchat. Well, it was an extraction from his phone, from Paul's phone, and then we did a search warrant to Snapchat to get that video.
And you got the video in early July 2021?
I believe that's when we got it back. Or the early morning hours of June 8th.
No, I said July. I'm sorry.
Okay. We got it a couple weeks after. Yes.
Yeah. So by early July, you had the Snapchat video.
Yes.
And it's in evidence as Exhibit 306. Will you please just pull it up, Doug, and let's freeze it. Stop it right there. Now, is this the same video that you showed Alec during the August 11th, 2021 interview that the jury and all of us just watched?
It appears to be the same one. Yes.
And you're pointing out to Alec in that interview, here's a picture of you in these clothes, and when did you change? That was your question, right?
Yes, sir.
And his answer was, I don't really remember when I changed. Is that right?
That is correct.
And this looks like he's wearing khaki pants, right?
Yes.
And it looks like a dress shirt. I think that's what you called it in the interview. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you agree it looks like a blue dress shirt?
It's a light blue. Yes.
Okay. And you agree that on August the 11th, at the conclusion of the interview, you essentially confronted him. Did you kill Aggie? Did you kill Paul? And he asked him, "My suspect." That happened on August 11th. Is that right?
Yes, it did.
And you said, "I got it." Where
So
the evidence leads me. Is that
Yes.
right? And you testified here today that on that date,
Therese, you're right. It almost makes you not want to call 911, right? If you see something happen, especially at your house, they're going to think you did it. And if they don't find anybody else, somebody made a great point earlier. I can't remember if I posted it or not, but it's like, so what a terrible argument. Yeah, here it is, John. I don't have anything that points me to anyone else. Therefore, you must be the killer. That's pretty horrible logic. I agree with you, but you'd be surprised how often logic like that is used. And I've got a lot of comments. I'm going to go through them all. I'm going to put some on when they're relevant. I'm going to answer some questions. So we're going to keep going with them. So if you haven't seen it yet, patience. And actually, this is really good for my voice because we're actually watching more of a video today than we have any other time. And there's still a ways to go. So it's going to be over an hour probably. So buckle up, settle in. We still got a lot to discuss, but we're seeing the defense's case progress here through one witness and one cross-examination. This is the lead investigator. This is the biggest piece of evidence for the murder trial, not the financial stuff, not the boat case, not the Satterfields, not the roadside incident. And this major witness for the murder case is explaining all the reasonable doubt. In my opinion, it's how I see it. It's okay if you don't. And I'm reading a lot and posting a lot of comments that disagree with that.
Alec Murdaugh was the one and only suspect.
He was the only known suspect at that time. Yes.
And I think you testified that that you had interviewed Blanca, or you got some information from Blanca, but where Blanca had talked about a conversation she had with Alec after the sentence.
Gates of above. I think if I was in the jury room with you, I would say, well, that's probably because it wasn't even his raincoat and it was something his dad used to shoot guns long time ago and threw it in his own closet. That probably explains it.
On August 11th.
It was sometime later. Yes.
And Alec was asking during this conversation with Blanca, what do you remember I'm wearing?
Nature of the objection.
State these sweet self-serving hearsay if possible. He's asking what the defendant said.
Objection's the same.
You learned in the course of your investigation that after you confronted Alec as being suspect and showing him this video that he questioned Blanca about what he was wearing that day. Is that fair?
Yes.
Up until August 11th, Alec had given you carte blanche to search anywhere, anytime on any property he had. Is that right?
That is correct.
And on August 11th, he was encouraging you to try to get information from General Motors, and he would do whatever he could to facilitate that exchange, right?
Yes.
And up until August 11th, I mean, you'd reached out to Alec, me, John Marvin, whenever you need to go on property to do anything, and you always got consent, correct?
That is correct.
And anything you asked, for the most part, it was provided.
Yes.
At no time prior to August 11th, 2021, did you ask Alec Murdaugh, where's that blue shirt? Where are those khaki pants? Where are those shoes? Did you?
No, sir, I did not.
You have never.
And this is what I was saying. Like, how can your argument be he ditched them all when you never even asked him where they were? You didn't ask him anything about them, but you had to switch because you found out he couldn't have been wearing the white shirt and the green shorts if he actually pulled the trigger. This is a fair question. You should want this if you were in the criminal defendant's shoes. I know none of us can see ourselves there, but you should want these questions answered. In our criminal justice system, they just flip the script because their original plan was actually not correct. And we'll get to that. But I mean, these are really good questions. So we're all, on board, gung-ho. Oh, this is why there's no blood on the white shirt, because he was wearing the seafoam green shirt and the khaki pants when he committed the murders, and then he ditched them. Or he hosed off and then ditched them. They didn't even look for him. They didn't even ask him where they were. They could have been sitting in his closet the whole time. They could have tested him to find no blood, but they didn't. So instead of saying what they did test and didn't have blood had blood on it, it's what they never even asked for. Now is what he must have been wearing. That hits me the wrong way.
Never asked him for that blue shirt, those tan shoes, and those khaki pants, have you?
No, sir.
They never asked him for them.
And the reason you didn't, because you weren't concerned about those clothes. Your investigation has been focused since early June on the T-shirt he was wearing, the shorts he was wearing, and the shoes he was wearing at the time he called 911, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And you were actively investigating whether or not the T-shirt had evidence of high-velocity blood spatter, which you would expect to find on someone who's shooting calls.
Back spatter, yes.
Back spatter. And your agency, in fact, engaged an expert out of state to give his assessment on whether there was high-velocity back spatter on the T-shirt, shorts, or any part of the clothing, right?
Yes, we asked an individual to examine it to look for back spatter.
And that was after it had been sprayed with, the shirt had been sprayed with LCD to see if there was any indication of blood on the shirt.
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed that you opened up in these exhibit boxes. I mean, you opened up, pulled out Alec's shoes, and you pulled out Alec's shorts. Doesn't matter, braided shorts around the courtroom. But you didn't pull out the shirt.
Mr. Meadows carried these shorts around the courtroom. Gingy probs, I'm with you 100%. I wish we could find a way to fix that because you're right, but it doesn't mean we should hope that people with a vigorous defense and money do get convicted in these situations. But I do agree with you. It sucks. And there's a lot of that.
Correct?
No, sir.
Well, the shirt is turned purple completely, has it not?
Yes,
Okay, and that was from treating it with this LCV.
that is correct. That is my understanding.
Right. Now, when you presented this case to the Colleton County Grand Jury to obtain a true bill indictment, you testified under oath that an expert had found
So here we go. Now we get into the grand jury proceedings or the report that he created. And this is wild. When I tell you this is abnormal, this is absolutely abnormal. We had an officer that submitted an affidavit for indictment that was the indictment was based on this affidavit. This person was arrested and was looking at life in prison for financial crimes. And it was my dad's case, and we were working it, and we were doing depots, and we were doing discovery. And throughout the deposition process, he got information that was absolutely opposite to what was in the under oath affidavit signed by the officer that the indictment was based off of. So much so that we redeposed the officer, asked him these questions very similar to here. That was not the information I was given. The officer said, the information I put in my affidavit was wrong. Absolutely. What this witness told me, that is not what they told me that day. And we got the indictment thrown out, case dismissed, literally. Because a lot of you are asking, and I'll put some of those on the screen now. Is this a reason for mistrial that he lied to the grand jury? I don't think he lied. I think facts were misrepresented to him, or he was given incorrect information, and that's what he reported. It wasn't his fault. He didn't lie. It wouldn't be a mistrial. It wouldn't be throwing out the case at this point. It would have been throwing out the indictment back then when they found out that this had occurred, and they must have found that even without this evidence, this case is going forward. That's the only explanation I can think of, because this is important to me, because this is literally the reason you're indicted is the information that goes to the grand jury. And we're about to hear a mess of what was presented to the grand jury.
multiple.
Is he talking about grand jury presentation?
He objects, but he's
Foundation.
talking about the...
Before the County Grand Jury, you prepared an outline of your presentation, did you not?
I did.
And in that outline, you identified essentially a narrative of what you were going to tell the grand jury, correct?
Yes.
And did you follow that narrative?
For the most part, yes.
And in that narrative, didn't you state that an expert found multiple particles of blood spatter on the shoulders and front of Alec's shirt? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And is that what you told the Colleton County Grand Jury?
Yes.
However, what SLED and this expert out in Oklahoma overlooked is Agent Zapata's confirmatory blood testing, about which he testified earlier in this trial, that out of 74 cuttings from Alec's t-shirt, 0 tested positive for human blood. You completely overlooked the fact that when you did a human tracing test to confirm whether it's blood, it came up negative. And wasn't that overlooked?
I had never seen that report.
Well, when did you see?
Which is like, the lead investigator didn't see that report, and he's the main witness in the grand jury. I guarantee you his grand jury testimony was very different than it was in this trial. I guarantee it. I guarantee he testified about facts, testified about the investigation and what they found and all this evidence. But all that's kind of fallen by the wayside by the time this trial came. And Bev, I know how you are, and I know how you probably came into this case. And I know that you're fair and you want things done right, regardless of how you feel about the person involved. And I agree with you. And this happens more than you would think.
See the report?
November of 2022.
After Alec had been indicted and months from trial. Is that right?
I agree, Susanna.
Now, a couple of things. You talk about on the tape that we just saw when you interviewed Alec. You told him that there's no.
Cynthia, you are not alone. A lot of people were in this boat. And I feel like I'm closer to this than thinking he committed this atrocity on his own.
No unknown DNA taken from the crime scene. Do you remember that on the tape?
At that time, yes.
Making that representation?
Yes.
That was August 11th?
Yes, sir.
2021. On August 11th, 2021, did you know that there was unknown DNA of a male obtained from Maggie's fingernail clipping?
I believe what it was explained to me is there was one allele under the fingernail, which is not enough for confirmatory test on the DNA.
Okay. What did you hear in court? There are 3 alleles?
I heard that it was one.
And another thing, what was tested for DNA? Do you remember?
I do not have that report in front of me, so I'm not going to attempt to speak on that right now.
I don't want to seem unfair, but like these types of comments, he told Maggie's sister that somebody must have been planning it for a while. So that proves he did it. Or he could have said, the way it was set up with 2 shooters to get in and out as soon as I wasn't there, somebody must have been planning it. I just don't understand how this proves he did it. I understand if you want to think that it's weird or strange or eerie. And Taco, I've seen a couple of your comments come through, and I have some more. I saw what you said about Alec doesn't own the Alameda house, which we'll get to that, but he was there. He was there till 8:44. And we know the murders occurred between 8:50 and 9:06. So if he went back to the main house and then went to mom's while this was occurring, that's an explanation. I'm not saying it's guaranteed. Absolutely not. But it's not the defense's burden to prove what he did after 8:44. It's the prosecution's burden to prove what he actually did between 8:50 and 9:06. And they can prove what he did up till 8:44 and then 9:06 to whatever when he was in the car and driving there and back and calling 911. But have they proven what happened in those 16 minutes?
Yes. Well,
There was a multitude of items. I know that.
well, I mean, let's start with Alex Shirt was tested for DNA, was it not?
Yes.
Maggie's clothes were not tested for DNA, were they?
No, they were not.
Paul's clothes were not tested for DNA, were they?
No, they were not.
Now, in your communication with Mr. Bevel out in Oklahoma, at one point in time, he asked you to look into whether there was a blood mark in Paul's pocket and whether there was a matching blood mark on the outside of Paul's pocket. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Was any DNA testing done of that area?
No, sir.
But Alex Shirt was DNA tested front and back, right?
Correct.
But Alex wasn't the victim of any crime on the night of June the 7th, was he?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So why are you testing Alex Murdaugh's clothes for DNA? What are you expecting to find?
Evidence to include or exclude him.
What would
Yeah,
exclusive
okay, so-
evidence look like?
He had told you that he had gone up to the bodies of Paul and Maggie, right?
Yes.
And what DNA result would have excluded him?
But, sorry, the lack of any other DNA would excluded him.
All right. So you didn't find any other DNA except I guess Nolan Tootin when he hugged him that night, right?
Correct.
So did that exclude him?
Well, the shirt wasn't our only piece of evidence.
Well, the shorts. Did you find any?
The shorts weren't our only piece of evidence.
I'm trying to focus on DNA.
Okay.
I mean, so the DNA didn't really add much whatsoever. Is that correct?
Correct.
In fact, it certainly support the conclusion that he could not have been wearing those clothes at the time Paul was murdered, right?
That's a distinct possibility, yes.
Well, I mean, we already talked about, and the jury's already seen how gruesome Paul's injuries were. They've seen the blood in the feed room, and they've seen everything that is unimaginable. There was no DNA found on Alex's shirt from Paul, was there? Except for a little piece
There
down
was
the
some
hem.
DNA of Paul on that shirt, yes.
There's just a little piece at the hem, is that right?
I believe there was one other spot, but yes.
In your outline to the Collin County Grand Jury, it indicates on page 18 that you found DNA in the areas of spatter that were identified belonging to Alec, Maggie, and Paul. Do you remember that?
Yes. And that was from the report that I had in my possession.
And was that accurate?
Now that I have the hemotrace report, the hemotrace indicates that the parts that she tested, no human blood was found.
So you didn't know at the time, but you know now that what you told the Collin County Grand Jury was not correct. Is that fair?
In reference to the shirt, correct.
That's bad. When you know what you told the grand jury to get a guy indicted for murder charges is wrong. That's bad.
Talk about a few other things right quick. On the night of early morning hours of June the 8th, you obtained Alex's clothes, the shirt, shorts, shoes, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned in your testimony that you wanted to get them there and then, but Buster was coming to the house, and so you graciously allowed Alex to go
I agree with you, Esme, big time. That's who it's really unfair to.
greet his son, and then you went up and got his clothes, correct?
Yes.
And when you got his shirt, did you, well, let me back up. You were standing in the doorway as he was changing?
Yes.
So you could see him changing.
Well, when he took his shorts off, I gave him some privacy.
And then he came out and dropped the shorts in a bag?
Yes. I can't remember if he dropped them in there or if he handed them to me and then I put them in there.
And if you handed them to you, you would have had latex gloves on for sure, right?
Yes,
And did you put the shorts in one bag
yes,
and then drop the t-shirt in another bag?
yes,
And the shoes, I guess, in a third bag?
yes, sir.
And did that happen sort of in the hallway?
That happened right there while I was standing in the doorway, yes.
And at the time, Alec was wearing, I guess, sort of like gym shorts or something he put on? Do
He put on clothes after he had changed, yes.
you remember what kind of clothes he put on? Like,
Not exactly, no, sir.
were they shorts?
I don't recall what he put on afterwards.
Was it a t-shirt?
I do not recall what he put on afterwards.
Can you say for sure it wasn't a pair of khaki pants? Can you say for sure?
Decent theory by the defense that he just put on the same pair of khaki pants he was wearing earlier that day. And guess what? The only reason that's plausible or possible is because you guys never even asked him about the khaki pants. Ever. That's the only reason that's even a possible question. You would think it'd be like, absolutely not. No way he put those khaki pants back on, but he could have.
Sure, it was not a pair of khaki pants.
I do not know what he put on afterwards.
Now, we've heard about a pair of khaki pants laying on the floor in the bathroom. Did Sled, Agent McAllister, anyone ever sees a pair of khaki pants from the house?
Not to my knowledge.
One of the things that you testified to, and I just want to see if we can clear it up. I don't. You stated in your testimony that Alec indicated he attempted to contact Nolan Tootin that night. Are you sure it was Nolan and it wasn't Rogan?
He contacted Nolan Tootin that night and attempted to contact Rogan Gibson that night.
Okay. And you also mentioned that as you're driving from Charleston, it's intermittently raining, sometimes hard, sometimes not so hard.
Yes, sir.
And then when you got to Moselle, it looked like it had been raining. Sometimes it rained hard, sometimes not so hard.
Yes, sir.
It wasn't true that rain was dripping off the rooftop of the kennels and above the feed room onto Paul's body.
That's a fair assessment.
And on his body, and then it was washing down the concrete pad. And that's a fair assessment also, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And if the jury has seen in this trial photos of puddles of water that may look like blood, it's very easily explainable that it came from the rain dropping on Paul's body, right?
Yes.
I mean, this guy is nuking the even possible scenarios the state has brought up that they haven't really actually proven what it is, but he is destroying it. So the only place we really have potential blood for the cleaning off, because we know for a fact it wasn't in Moselle, they never searched Alameda until months later, and it wasn't there when they searched there, is this brownish reddish stuff that they never tested in the puddles at Moselle at the kennels. But now he's just said, oh yeah, that's probably just from the rain. It's not good. It's not.
I think you covered it. Alec Murdaugh called you multiple times, June and July and early August, asking for an update. Did he not?
We communicated. Sometimes it was via text and sometimes it was via phone call.
Yeah. And not only did he want an update for himself, but he also kept wanting you to update Maggie's parents as well.
And I met with Maggie's parents, yes.
Sure. But Alec was requesting that of you, was he not?
Well, he was requesting that of me, yes, but I also intended to meet with Maggie's parents regardless if he requested it or not.
Okay. And you're also aware that Alec and Buster and his family put up a reward for tips.
I knew a reward was offered. It was under my impression that it came from the law firm, but I know that a reward was offered of $100,000 with an expiration date.
They love to say with an expiration date, and I agree. I think that does add some context. That's important. I wouldn't put an expiration date on there, would you? If it was for my son and wife, no expiration date, and no way it would only be $100,000. Not if I was spending 50 grand a month on drugs. So I agree with him there. I agree, Gingy. I feel like a lot of evidence I've wanted to see has been brought up by the defense, not the prosecution. And your last comment about the timelines and how they're presenting them. I mean, I think the defense is doing a better job there. Joe,
And,
this is a good question. Do people know that law enforcement can use investigation tactics, aka lying, which came out in this cross? Or is that surprising to people to hear? And I don't think he lied to the grand jury. So I don't think I said that. So if I did, I'd like to backtrack and say he gave them false information that was not his fault, because it was false information that was provided to him.
In the interview of August 11th, one of the questions that Alec had of you was essentially whether Maggie and or Paul suffered. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And I think you told them that if they did, it wasn't for very long, a matter of seconds. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I agree, John.
Now,
Katie, I've seen better in much
talk about the shot
less
shells.
serious cases.
The shot shells that were found in the feed room where Paul was murdered, there was a buckshot and I think it was Winchester dry lock waterfowl.
Yes, sir.
That's not turkey load, right?
I was told it was turkey loaded first. I'm not 100.
Thank you,
I'm
Heather.
not 100% sure. I know it was.
Okay.
I'm sick of
Turkey load,
this ammo
Yes,
talk.
someone.
And of firearms and shot shells. And in the interview, you told Alec that that there were multiple guns found on the property that were loaded with
Here we
buckshot
go.
and turkey load. Do you remember that?
I believe I used buckshot, birdshot.
Okay. Well, I mean, Agent Crawford testified, but can you identify any weapons that were loaded with buckshot and birdshot that were found in the house?
Repeat the question.
Can you identify any weapons found in the house at Moselle that were loaded with buckshot and birdshot?
No, sir.
So this is an interesting thought here, Daniel. How much of a case will they put on? I think they have it prepared, and I think they will, because I think they're very confident in their case because the state just doesn't have much. But this comment is why I'd be shocked if Alec Murdaugh took the stand. Big Dog, glad work's going by even faster today.
Now, when you told Alec that there were multiple weapons loaded with that same load, buckshot and birdshot, I mean, was that an investigative tool, or were you just under the misimpression that was the case?
Investigative tool.
So you lied to him.
I'm allowed to use trickery to elicit a response.
I understand. And so you're trying to trick him. Agreed?
I'm allowed to use trickery to elicit a response. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most people know that, but when you're saying, oh, he gave inconsistent stuff or he did this or that, it's like, but you're admittedly trying to trick him. So if we then go say, yeah, he lied about some facts because he knew you were lying to him, doesn't make it right? No. Are some jurors, obviously, if you look at this chat, some jurors are still going to convict him over that lie, but I think it's at least an explanation. Cops are lying to him. He's lying to them. They're trying to pin this on him. He's trying to get him to go after the real killers. I agree for crime's sake.
And you're allowed to do it, and you did it.
Yes.
But you also testified under oath in front of the state grand jury, said basically the same thing, that there were 4 shotguns on the Moselle property and they were loaded with buckshot and turkey load.
Yes.
Now, were you mistaken then, or were you trying to trick the state grand jury?
So there is some cooler talk. I don't know if we'll be able to get into it. We're already an hour and 10 minutes in. Okay, if this is the case, why did they find none of it? If this chain of events is what happened, why could they literally find no trace of it anywhere? They found nothing. We've had cases where it's kind of gruesome, but people have put bodies in wood chippers. And Pete was just telling me about this case the other day. And the wood chipper came back with no DNA and no blood on it. So the defendant's thinking, haha. But they said they had never had a wood chipper. It was rented, returned, being fully Cloroxed. That's evidence.
No. I was not trying to trick the state grand jury.
You were mistaken.
No.
What, did not,
The shotguns that we recovered from the house had 2 different loads in them. They weren't Winchester or Federal. They had different loads in them. So when I tell the state grand jury that there's different loads in the shotguns, there were different loads in the shotgun.
oh, you're saying you weren't telling them that it was buckshot and turkey load, but you were telling.
So the same thing he told Alec that he admitted was trickery and not true, he told the grand jury. Again, I think he believes he was telling the truth, but it doesn't look good. Pixie, I think that there's a chance, but I think they are going to. They're definitely trying to tell the state they're going to, and they're flying in experts for Friday. They've said it over and over again. They are playing a lot of gamesmanship for sure.
On them, it was just different brand names of something.
I may have used buckshot and turkey load or birdshot, but they were 2 different loads.
Well, I think we established that SLED did not find any weapons at the house with buckshot and turkey load loaded in, right?
That is correct.
I hear you, Jay. And I'm not just looking at this guy's life in totality. I'm looking at this trial and a lot of other trials. And we're talking about murder. And just in my opinion, this is the highest burden in our country is beyond a reasonable doubt. And they're just not even close. If this is beyond a reasonable doubt, we shouldn't have trials. We should just let them have a circle that they put somebody in and we just put them in jail. because they did nothing to prove he should stay in that circle. They couldn't put anybody else in there, basically. That's what it came down to. So that's where I stand.
I'm gonna show you page 48, line 7 through 14 of your statewide grand jury testimony.
And this is where he's going to impeach him here.
I'll tell you, I'm gonna read the question if you'll read the response. It says, at line 7, all right, and were all of them, to your recollection, loaded that like that? And your answer was?
They were loaded in a similar fashion.
Question, in a similar fashion?
Yes, sir.
Question, with one turkey load and one buckshot load?
Response, yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And that was not accurate, correct?
Correct.
It's not good. I can't believe this guy was lying under oath. So I'll just assume he was given bad information.
And people do make mistakes, do they not?
Yes, they do make mistakes.
And people make mistakes about time frequently. Is that right?
I would believe that would be the most mistake made is time.
People make mistakes and they make it about time. Well, I'm gonna actually add to that answer. I think that's the most frequent way they make mistakes is about time.
Okay. And here, you were asked to identify inconsistencies with Alex's statements to you, and the one that you pointed out was times. You recall that?
And that was his inconsistency, was times. Just what you said is the biggest mistake people make. Not lie, but mistake. And if he was making a mistake, he was not lying. I'm not saying that proves anything. It's just an interesting thought, just like Derek here. I mean, there are a lot of interesting explanations for this stuff.
Well, the inconsistencies is they kept changing.
Well, that's right. I mean, he said on June 8th he was at his mother's for, quote, a little while. And then you said he changed it on June 10th to 25 to 30 minutes. You remember testifying to that?
I do.
And then you said on August the 11th, he said he was there 45 minutes to an hour.
Yes.
Okay. And you found that those were inconsistent.
Well, there was a difference between 20 to 30 minutes and 45 minutes to an hour.
Well, let's work on that. He left. Well, let me tell you, he told
All right, here we go. So here's his big lie, or one of his big lies, where a lot of people think he's guilty because he said 30 to 45 minutes or 45 minutes to an hour that he was at his mom's house. And when I say, does that matter? The better way is, which I think Griffin says, is that material? How does that affect your investigation? And that's what I'm saying. Griffin laid out the whole defense here, the big reasonable doubt defense. And he's about to get to the other plausible explanations of who done it. But the big reasonable doubt defense, he lays out here just one step at a time.
The Moselle property between 9 and 9:10, did he not?
He showed me his text messages, and it was narrowed down to 9:06. Yes.
All right. So he clearly told
9:04, 9:06.
So on the night of June 7th, early morning hours of June 8th, he told you, looking at the text message, I left here at 9:06. Is that right?
Correct.
And he got back when he called 911 about 10:06, right?
Correct.
And so he was gone to his mother's almost an hour, was he not?
He was away from Moselle for an hour, but my question to him was, how long were you at your mother, or how long were you at a meetup?
And in your investigation, as we established in my cross-examination of you months, well, I don't know how long I've been standing here, a few minutes ago, it's your investigative belief that Maggie and Paul were murdered sometime between 8:50 and 9:06, right?
Yes.
So for your investigative purposes, does it make any difference if he's at his mother's house 25 minutes, 35 minutes? Obviously, he couldn't be there an hour and make it back and call 911, but I mean, isn't that really not material? How long he was at his mom's?
If I'm trying to build a timeline, yes, it is.
Well, your timeline is, you're focused on is,
I would say, tell me how that would make a difference. If they're dead by 9:06, and we all agree he left at 9:06, it says he left at 9:06. The car stuff confirms he left at 9:06. If he would have been at his parents' house for 5 hours, would it have made a difference? Maybe if he was there for a long time. I would think if he was there for a longer time, like an hour, hour and a half, whatever, more likely he went there to clean off and ditch his clothes and all that. So more likely you'd want to go search there. But the less time he was there, the less opportunity he had to ditch stuff and clean off while he was there. And we know that he did not do that there based on Miss Shelley. So it's a lie that really doesn't matter. I mean, am I way off? You guys tell me, please. Tell me if I'm way off. Bring it on. Bring it to me. Am I way off about the fact that it doesn't matter if he would have said he was at his parents' house for 2 hours? Because we know, everybody knows the murders occurred before he left to go to his parents' house.
8:50 to 9:06, right?
Well, my timeline and what we're talking about is how long he was away from the house when he says he went to Alameda. So he leaves Moselle at approximately 9:06 is when he sends the text to Maggie. And the 911 call comes in at 10:06. So I know he's away from Moselle for an hour. And he says he goes to Alameda. How long did you spend at Alameda?
Right.
He tells me 20 to 30 minutes. Then he goes 45 minutes to an hour.
I see. I got it. So it's possible that he was only at Alameda for 5 minutes and he was spending the other time hiding evidence. I mean, I understand that would be what you're looking at, right?
Yes.
But General Motors has sent their records in and we know he went straight to Alameda and goes straight back, right?
Which blows up your investigation once again. The more evidence that we get, the actually worse it is for the prosecution. And animals in different places question, the state put it in, which they're allowed to. Their explanation is going to be, you can just use it once it's evidence. You don't have to have somebody testify to it. You can just pull the data and say, here's what it says. And they're just saying it confirms their timeline. They don't want to dig into it. Defense seems excited to dig into it, and they're already using it now in cross-examination.
That is true. But if you look at the GPS points that came from General Motors, one of them puts him way in the backyard of Alameda.
Right.
Not in the driveway or where it's normal for them to park.
In the backyard at the door where Miss Shelley Smith says he knocked on.
I believe that point's closer to Miss Libby's work shed.
Okay, we'll get there. Okay. From phone records, essentially when he got there, like 9:22, correct?
Yes, sir. I believe that's the time, yes.
And we know from the GM telemetry data and the GM OnStar and other records what time he left, about 9:45, right?
Yes.
And so we know exactly how long he was there.
Yes.
But the fact that he couldn't recall whether he and Paul rode around for an hour and a half, two and a half hours, you found that significant in your investigation.
Yes.
There's no answer for this, Lori.
Now, you also testified that
The chat answers Jimenez's
that in
question.
the fall of 2021, there started up a financial investigation into Alex financial dealings. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that overlapped and fed off each other with what your murder investigation was doing?
Yes, it involved Alec.
Right.
So we were looking at the totality of the circumstances and seeing if there was any paths that crossed or.
Well, I tell you what, I'll skip one part. In your interview, as of August 11th, you told us that.
Stormy Nights. Absolutely. And we watched it together.
You had excluded everyone from the circle who had come into the circle except for Alec, and he was your one and only suspect at that point.
Yes.
And you talked about interviewing C.B. Rowe and him telling you where he was on June 7th, right?
Yes.
But later you found out he lied to you about where he was on June 7th, right?
Yeah, he came forward and was honest with us without us even approaching him.
All right, but he was initially told you one thing about where he was, subsequently told you I was not honest about where I was.
Yes, he didn't want Mr. Murdaugh to know that he was looking for another job in fear of being fired.
But part of this financial investigation that overlapped, you developed information that Alec was stealing money from a law firm, client money to support a drug addiction, did you not?
That's what was purported, that it was for drug addiction, yes.
And you learned through your investigation that Alec was paying up to $50,000 a week to a guy named Curtis Eddie Smith for drugs.
That's what was told to us, yes.
That's a lot of drugs. $50,000 a week, again, to Curtis Eddie Smith. And where that door is starting to creak open, at least in the judge's mind, I think there are some arguments that they still didn't open the door. I know you're going to call me crazy, but if the judge wants to allow them to, they definitely were not afraid by doing this. And we're going to watch the ruling and look at their faces. And some of you have already commented on it. Did they want that door open? Do they want that information in? Do they have a way to spin it? Because I think they're ready to use every bit of bad evidence against Alec Murdaugh.
And you learned through this investigation what was told to you that Eddie was buying these drugs from other folks, members of Sandhill drug gang, right?
Yes.
And the Sandhill drug gang was a precursor to the Cowboys drug ring, right?
I'm not familiar with the Cowboys, but that's what I've been told, yes.
So I'm going to get to a lot of your comments about this. about the drugs and the gangs and whether or not this is a good motive to kill. And if Eddie was skimming money, I mean, they're getting all this testimony out on cross-examination where the defense lawyers are basically allowed to testify and asking these questions. I mean, I think this is really good for Alec Murdaugh. We went through all the reasonable doubt and the bad investigation. Now we're going to, well, if it wasn't him, then who was it? The gang members for the drug money. I mean, a tale as old as time, right? Thank you so much, Heather. This is a great compliment. And yes, I'm still practicing. So I do lawyer like this. I don't know if I should say like this, but I put everything into it that I absolutely have. So thank you.
And you learned that Eddie owed these drug gang members a lot of money for drugs that were sold to Alec, didn't you?
I believe the information came into that they weren't worried about what was owed because they knew they were going to get paid.
That came to you after the Maggie and Paul were murdered, right?
That came to us after September incident as well.
And did you ever conduct a cell phone analysis of these drug gang members to see where they were on the night of June the 7th?
I didn't have their phone numbers. In my experience, that they don't keep the same phone numbers. They use what's called burner phones. But we also did an analysis around Moselle trying to encompass anybody else coming in. And that information did not pan out. There was only 2 people identified, and they were emergency.
So I don't know. I don't know, Greg. It doesn't seem like they did investigate them.
First responders.
And you're talking about the geofencing stuff.
Yes, sir.
But did you ever obtain any DNA samples from these drug gang members to see if they matched Maggie's fingernail?
No, sir.
And you really never put them in the circle, did you?
Investigation into that, in my understanding, I'm not investigating the drug aspect. That investigation is still ongoing from my understanding.
So are they still investigating them? I don't know.
1 second, Your Honor.
So now is when they take a break. And then
Could this have been a drug hit?
they come back. We will finish across here.
You did not identify any life insurance on the lives of Maggie and Paul, is that correct?
No, I did not.
And one of the things that was asked of Dr. Reamer about a conversation she had with you as to the stain on Maggie's calf. Do you remember whether Dr. Reamer told you that there's a bruise there as well?
Was to make bruise on Maggie's left calf that coincided with possibly shoe print, but Dr. Reimer did not feel someone intentionally stood on her leg. And that's according to my notes.
Yes. And those related to, there's a muddy thing on the back of her calf, and Dr. Reimer noticed there was a bruise there as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Actually, got fingerprints. Were there any dusting for fingerprints done in the feed room at Moselle?
I am not aware if there was or not. I wasn't in the feed room with the crime scene the entire time.
Okay. And and we talked about the DNA swabs. One of the people that was supplying Curtis Eddie Smith is in custody, is he not?
He is in custody, yes, sir.
Have you gotten a DNA swab from him?
I have not, but I know one has been obtained, yes.
Okay. And you know,
So it's like, are they even trying or no? They're in on Alec. And again, the other motive or logic would be drug money.
it's been cross-checked against?
It was not obtained in this case. I don't know. I believe it has been cross-checked.
Okay.
I don't have that report in front of me.
Yeah. Another point. Just understand that you were not made aware of the negative hematite.
So Jim's about to answer this if he hasn't already. Is the suspect supposed to prove this crime for you? Because Nala's, that's what I would ask. I feel like he was very cooperative.
Raised confirmatory blood test until sometime in November of 2022. Is that right?
That is correct.
How is it that the lead case agent is left out of the information channel for something so significant?
From what I was able to figure out, when the lab issues reports, pursuant to my case or any other agent's case, we have email notifications to go in and find that report, or there's a new report available. Once I figured out that report existed, I searched my emails and I did not have an email notification that report was there. There's multiple other reports. I've been in there multiple times looking at other reports, and I did not see that report. I was not made aware of its existence.
Sure. And it wasn't until after you saw that report that now you changed focus to the clothes he was wearing in the Snapchat video. Is that correct?
Restate that question.
It wasn't until after you became aware that there's no blood, hematite confirmatory test of blood on Alec's shirt that you start, asking questions of folks about the clothing that Alec was wearing in the Snapchat video.
Well, I asked him on August the 11th of 2021 because I had that Snapchat video of when did he change clothes.
Oh, and he said
He didn't know.
didn't know. But you never asked for those clothes, never tried to find those clothes, never executed a search warrant for those clothes. Had you?
Yes, sir.
That's brutal. Why not? Why, if you think those are the clothes he was wearing, why didn't you try to find him at least and say, we tried, we executed search warrant, we searched all his closets and all of his houses and we didn't find him? I don't get that. My own grandma, I'll tell you what, it's really hard to wind down after these. So that's, I think, why I'm like losing my voice and stuff, because it's really hard to sleep because I'm like all wound up. And then I try to go to bed. Deb S, good. I hope everybody went subbed to Law and Lumber. Sarah Bellum, I think we have a couple times on this case, but we haven't ever had 10,000 likes on a Murdaugh video. So can we get 10,000 likes on this video, or maybe even 50,000, because he was paying that much a week for drugs, apparently. All right, we're almost done here.
Did you develop any information that Eddie Smith was skimming money, that Alec was paying him for the drugs, that he wasn't paying the Sand Hills gang everything they were doing?
I am not aware of that information.
Okay. And the last thing, you had mentioned that part of your, and on the tape interview with Alec, you had mentioned that the blackout cartridges that were found near Maggie's body matched, or that were extracted from the same firearm as used to extract cartridges at the house and the shooting range. Remember telling Alec that?
Yes.
And, but you were informed, though, that forensically at the lab, they could not say with 100% confirmation that they did actually match until the missing firearm is recovered.
That was my understanding, yes.
And that's what Agent Greer or others that he worked for and told you as lead case agent.
So he's going to reiterate it here. And this is the exact line of questioning, if you remember, that Jimmy G tried to ask to the ballistics expert who danced around it magically like an expert does. Well, this officer is just like, he's like, just beat me up, Scotty. You got me. So yes, that's what they told me too. They couldn't prove it with 100% certainty. So every point Jim's been trying to make throughout the case, he hit, and he hit it hard throughout this cross.
That's what Mr. Greer told me, yes.
That he couldn't say with 100% certainty. Is that right?
Of which he couldn't say 100% certainty which firearm that came out of until he had a firearm to compare it to.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Did he say that those shell casings from Maggie's body, the side of the house, and the shooting range were all?
All right. So a lot of you are wanting to hear some of this redirect. I don't know how long it is, but we're already at an hour and a half. Why not? Let's get a little bit of it. I may skip some of it. I can't listen to all of this again. Some of this is just not great. It's like cringeworthy, but we'll listen to some of it.
Came from, they'd been in the same gun at one time.
Yes.
And when you asked the defendant on that in the third interview, this was told him, Jackson, I told you. So it was a family owned gun, right?
Bobby
Yes.
Cat, I agree. This witness is literally adding reasonable doubt. And again, this is a state's witness and potentially their last witness, or who they plan to be their last, or one of their last witnesses, for the jury to have this on their mind when they rest their case, because they were supposed to rest today. Now, lucky for them, I think lucky for them, because to me, it's a horribly damning case to realize what Alec Murdaugh is capable of when we hear about this roadside shooting. So at least they're going to get that and not have their case end on this witness.
Then he kind of responded, how did they get it? He was almost going with, how did they get it, right?
Yes, sir.
That was one of the ways you get somebody out of the center, by asking them to give statements.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what happened.
Yes, sir.
And on June 7th, did you say, tell me what happened?
Yes, sir.
And on June 10th, did you say, tell me what happened? And on August 11th, did you bring it back to you right now?
No, the blue shirt?
On August 11th.
Oh,
you
no,
said
sir.
he was on-
No, sir.
And he tried to describe it. Did this, what is described as a seafoam shirt? Were you familiar with that? How would that shirt be described? Do you know in your investigation by the witness who saw it? Ms. Blanca says.
Ms. Blanca described to me that she saw him leaving the house that Monday morning in a seafoam pullover. I believe she characterized it as a Vinnie Vine shirt.
She said a polo shirt leaving that morning.
Yes.
On this video he showed you with the tree. How would she describe that shirt in the tree?
A blue button up she described as a Columbia style shirt.
Columbia. Seafoam.
I hear you,
Seafoam
Jenny.
color.
You don't lead the witness.
Did she tell you what color she thought it was?
The one leaving that morning.
Yes, sir.
No, the
The
one
one
in
with the tree.
blue.
On June 7th, June 10th, August 11th, did Alex Murdaugh ever mention anybody else that might be a potential suspect in this case?
No, sir. Other than he continued to mention the boat case. But no
So they condemn him for the boat case, for mentioning the boat case. He's trying to point the finger, but then they also condemn him because he didn't bring up the drug dealers. And there was a question in here. I'll get to it, I'm sure. There's a question about why didn't he point to the drug dealers earlier? He should have. Well, he didn't want everybody to know he was a drug addict at that point, because in June, July, and August, people didn't know he was a drug dealer. He didn't get fired from the firm. You would have to take a little break from your firm if you're addicted to drugs and go to rehab. So he didn't want to admit that at that time. But again, maybe that's evidence he cared more about protecting his financial crimes in his job than he did about finding who killed his family, because maybe it was him.
specific individual.
Did he mention to you anything about these cowboys that Mr. Griffin's asked you about?
No, sir.
Did he mention to you anything about a Curtis Edward Smith?
No, sir.
June 7th he did?
No, sir.
June 10th he did?
No, sir.
August 11th he did?
No, sir.
When did he ask you about Curtis Edward? Or when did he bring in Curtis Edward Smith into this investigation? He being Alex Murdaugh.
And here's how the door is opened.
September 4th, 2021.
September 4th, 2021. And can you tell us how that came about?
Overruled.
Continue.
How did it come about that Mr. Murdaugh told you about Curtis Edward Smith?
On September 4th, 2021, I received a phone call from Randy Murdaugh that Alec had been shot, and they were concerned for his safety and what was going on. And I immediately responded along with other agents to the scene. And the scene on Old Salcahatchee Road in Varnville, Hampton County.
And did you go to that scene?
I did.
And did you see the defendant Alex Murdaugh at the scene?
No, I did not. He had been transported to the hospital.
And do you know where he was transported?
I believe it was Savannah, 8th Hospital in Savannah.
And at that point, did you or another state agent go to Savannah Hospital to interview the defendant?
2 other agents went to the hospital to interview Alec.
And was one of those agents Neil?
No, Agent Kelly.
Agent Kelly? You in the courtroom? Will you please stand?
I don't get why they do this. This must be a
Yes, sir.
South Carolina thing. Are you in the courtroom? Could you please stand? It's like, you don't have to identify anybody but the defendant, but both sides have done it a ton. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
And in the hospital, and what day was this?
September 4th, 2021.
September 4th, 2021. And at that point, did the defendant, or did you learn through the investigation, did he say somebody shot him on the side of the road?
Yes, through the investigation, that's what's told to us.
Or did he identify anybody on September 4th who shot him?
Not by name, he gave a description.
He gave a description.
Yes.
A fake
Did
one.
he attempt to pick somebody out of a book?
No, sir. There was, I believe, a SLED forensic composite artist went down and did a composite drawing with him.
So he helped get a sketch of the person who shot him?
Yes, sir.
Describe the person?
Yes, sir.
Did they actually do a sketch?
Yes, sir. Did.
And at that point, had he mentioned anybody's name else in the investigation that you ought to go back and look at about Paul and Maggie's murder?
No, sir.
We're going to get to it, Melissa.
After that, did the defendant tell you or your law enforcement friends he was lying about the roadside incident?
Objection to the extent it's hearsay. If you didn't tell this agent, then it's not appropriate witness.
Yes, sir.
Did the defendant give another statement about the roadside?
Yes, he did.
Thank you, Heather.
Did he admit he was lying?
Statement to you or to someone else?
I think the state knows. I think the jury knows the answer to this is yes, but not this witness. So the judge sustains this objection.
Statement to someone else, sir.
Objection sustained.
I don't believe he ever brought Curtis Smith's name into it. It was through investigation that we developed him as a suspect or the subject involved in the shooting.
And did the defendant give an interview with Mr. Harpootlian and Mr. Griffin via audio phone call where they mentioned Curtis Edward Smith?
Objection is overruled.
Arden, I definitely think, and there's some other comments, I definitely think the defense, it was a calculated risk. They felt like it was worth it to get into the drug dealers, Eddie's skimming money and baiting them into potentially calling Eddie because they want to tear him apart on the stand. I'm going to put some other comments that absolutely agree with you on here. I don't think they were that upset that it's coming in. I would be terrified if this was coming in because I think it's very damning and it shows that that Alec Murdaugh is next level when it comes to this stuff. He's not just a thief, but he will go to great lengths in his crimes. And so I think it's bad, but I think you're right. And we're going to watch their faces when the judge changes his ruling.
I know an interview was conducted. I don't know who was present. I was not present for the interview.
Did Curtis Edward Smith come through the chief investigator's name come out of that interview?
I do not know, sir.
I agree, Laura, potentially. Lynn, I think
But
it
prior
benefits
to
their
that-
case, just the generally bad guy rule, how deep Alec Murdaugh's willing to go, how much he's willing to lie, similar MO. He lied to law enforcement then, he's lying to law enforcement now, and then he changes his story. Lee Silva, you better believe it. If my wife's awake, that's what we're watching tonight. Kendra, happy birthday. Addison. Happy 16, sweet 16. That's awesome.
That day, had Alex Murdaugh ever mentioned to you Curtis Edward Smith or anybody else that might have been involved in his son's or mother's, his son's or his wife's murder?
No, sir.
So after the roadside incident, and whatever he told whoever's going to be called, that's when he brought in other people.
Yes, sir.
Now, Mr. Griffin's asked a lot of questions about the search. The crime scene where the two bodies were, was that secure?
Yes, it was.
Was evidence?
And now he brings it up. He didn't bring it up before. John, yes, I think they're going to rest tomorrow, but he didn't bring it up before. But now he starts talking a little bit about the crime scene.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Were swabs taken?
Yes, they were.
And I think he asked you about the Suburban, his Suburban, and whether or not there was anything wet in the back of his car. Are you familiar with what's known as a cooler?
Yes.
A good old cooler?
Yes, sir.
Could you put wet garments in a cooler?
You can, yes.
You can.
Yes.
Okay.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Possibilities. That's not proving it. Just because something was, you could put it in the other car. You could put it in the back of the truck. You could carry it and walk. You could do a million things with it. But what proof do you have that he did something like this with it? I just don't like this type of prosecuting.
Can you ask you about anything in the car? Was there blood on the steering wheel of Suburban, that car?
There was blood found on that steering wheel, yes.
And that DNA from that blood came back to whom?
Maggie Murdaugh.
I answered
Maggie
this one
Murdaugh.
earlier, Coco.
And he asked you about some guns. Did the defendant hand you a gun?
He handed first responders a gun, yes, sir.
What type of gun was that?
It was a 12-gauge shotgun.
I say you some time on. I
I understand.
apologize. And as a result of swabs, was blood identified on that gun?
Yes, sir.
Whose blood? Whose
Maggie.
DNA was that?
Maggie Murdaugh.
Maggie Murdaugh.
Yes.
And
He's about to get to everything he told the grand jury. We're going to skip through that. There is a little tiff with Harpoolian that you know how I like lawyer tiff, so we're going to get to that. Janet, I think you might be right. I don't think they're going to bring it in their case, Chief. I think they hope the prosecution calls him in their case because it means more when you say this is a state witness and he told you this. This is a state witness. That's why I'm making a big deal. All these witnesses for the state that are giving the defense these points or this reasonable doubt is more important than if you call the witness yourself, if you can believe that.
Is that 12-gauge shotgun consistent or inconsistent with the weapon that killed Paul Murdaugh?
It was the same gauge, being a 12-gauge, and firearms examiner was not able to exclude the gun.
Which means you could include it but not exclude it.
Correct.
And Mr. Griffin asked you about getting out of the circle. But when you talk to somebody, are you looking for consistent statements, inconsistent when you're examining or talking to somebody who might be involved? Why are you asking them questions?
To learn more, to see if they tell the same story.
And if that story is contradicted by other witnesses, do you want to know that?
Yes, sir.
And were you going out to check his story with other witnesses?
Yes.
What he told you versus what other witnesses told you?
Correct.
As a result of that, were there contradictions between
Not
what Mr.
quite,
Murdaugh told you
Bex.
and what
Not
witnesses
quite.
told you?
Yes.
Shelley Smith?
Yes.
Wonka Simpson?
Yes.
And he asked you, spent a long time about this time frame. Why does it matter when you got out of Alameda? Would it matter if somebody's hiding guns somewhere on Alameda? Would you need time to do that?
You would need time, but if you're
But buddy, you missed it. You missed the boat. Nancy Joe, I think you might be right. This prosecutor totally missed the boat. If he had more time in Alameda, he would have more time to hide the guns, but he didn't. He wasn't there 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half, whatever. He was there 21 minutes. We know that based on the OnStar, based on Shelley Smith. She said 15 to 20. The car confirms 21. That's it. That's all the time he had. And Shelley testified to exactly how long he was there, and she saw him while he was there. The tarp the next day, whatever, but that doesn't matter about how long he was there on the 7th. This prosecutor just missed it with this question.
familiar with it, I don't think you would need that much time.
But would it take time to go hide guns?
5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Would it take time for
The cop gets it, thank God. And he's like, it only takes 5-10 minutes. He could have hit him in 20 minutes. It's like this prosecutor's missing. This prosecutor is proving the defense's point. It doesn't matter if he lied about how long he was at the house. Now, if you want to say he's a liar, he's trying to cover stuff up, consciousness of guilt, fine. But it doesn't actually matter in the timeline. It doesn't prove anything.
That'd be a reason you might have a contradictory statement how long you visited
Yes,
somebody.
yes,
And your car would still be there, wouldn't it?
yes.
Did CB, he asked you about CB Road. Did he ever identify did he ever tell you about a cooler that was found out there at some point that wasn't usually there?
Yes, out by what's been referred to as the skin shed where they process meat.
What was that about that cooler? In course of your investigation, had that cooler been there before this night?
CB Rowe told us it was not. When he left on Friday, prior to the,
Objection sustained.
Did you see that cooler after Friday?
did I see the cooler on when CB Rowe pointed it out? Yes.
You did see it.
Was there a box? Was there a box outside? Was there a box there the next day? So he could have put him in the box, right? It's like, come on, Kim. No, they're not admissible in cases like this, or in any case that I'm aware of.
Yes.
And was it there Saturday? Excuse me. Did you see it on Monday?
Is that a clap?
Or Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning?
Monday night, Tuesday morning, yes, I did see it.
Did you see that cooler again?
I don't recall.
Okay. He asked you about the rain jacket, the tarp, and asked you if was there any blood or notes it must give me.
I hear you, Golden Girl. I hear you.
Is that coat? Does that repel water? That jacket? That jacket, the rain jacket?
Yes, I would think so. Being a rain jacket.
Was there GSR located on that rain jacket?
On the inside of it, yes.
Say again, on the where?
On the inside,
That
Ask
false,
you
like, say it again, where when he knew it and he heard it, it's like that's like his tactic to really beat it into the jury. But I'm not a fan.
Blood or DNA? Was there a whole bunch of GSR found on that inside of that rain jacket?
yes, it was.
And he asked you about, I believe, Shelley's testimony or about seeing that rain jacket. Did you say he was holding it like this?
Yes, she said it was balled up in his arms.
And he was asking you about timing. I think it was some crazy. That could be there 5 years, 10 years. When did Blanca's system? When did Shelley, sweet, I'm sorry, Ted, your investigation? Hey, I saw him with this blue vinyl coat. When was that in relation to the murders? Was that 5 years, 10 years? How long?
Thank you, Your Honor. He's misstating the
Objection is
evidence
overruled.
in the record.
She told us she saw it the day after Mr. Randolph Murdaugh's funeral, which through my investigation,
Objection is overruled.
which would have been June 14th, the following Monday after Paul and Maggie were murdered. So 7 days.
Did that include timeline?
I believe so, yes.
Some of his financial crimes?
Yes, sir.
Background?
Yes, sir.
Did that include were the blackout casings near Maggie?
This is what he told the grand jury.
Alex originally gave to present the Alex was in possession of a shotgun. Tell him about Shelley's defendant denying going to the kennels.
Where he went, but he was never at the kennels after dinner.
Did you mention them about Rogan Gibson?
He was 99% sure that he heard Alec in the background
To the grand jury, this video ultimately got looked. Tell them the contents of that.
and that Maggie was in the background.
To them, you going to, and her plans of whether she was going to go to Moselle that night or wanted to. If anything.
That Maggie had intended to go to Edisto, but had received a call from Alec requesting her to come home, that Paul was there, which contradicted the statements from the sister, Marion, where Maggie, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Maggie had called Marion and said that she had received a call from Alec, that Alec wanted her to come to Moselle, and that Paul was there and his dad was in the hospital. But during an interview with Alec in August, he stated that
And that was a good inconsistency that we found good for the state in that interview, that he was acting like he didn't even know, or was she supposed to ride with me? I definitely didn't summon her, but he did.
basically a surprise. He didn't know she was coming.
And did you mention to them that an reward had been offered, another offer?
The reward was offered $100,000 with an expiration date.
And did you tell them whether or not there was any other information or any other credible evidence pointing to anybody else?
I did.
Mr. Griffin asked you about the scene. It was bloody.
Very bloody.
Defendant said he had touched and rolled, tried to move Paul.
Yes, sir.
Any evidence of that on him?
No.
Your eyes.
I did not see any on Alec. No, sir.
I agree, Miriam. This is one of the tough spots with this.
Mr. Griffin's gone. I don't know if it's a good question or not. Did they say go down there? Him.
No, sir.
Alex Murdaugh, any of the lawyers there?
No,
They give you consent to search Alameda that night?
no, sir.
They said, go search Alameda.
No, sir.
Is that fun?
All right, so hold on. We're gonna watch this one, okay? And I'm gonna put it in normal for us to watch it. So did it go to Alameda? He said, I'm not sure if I should even ask this. And Harpoolian giggles, and now Harpoolian's about to just lay it out there and be like, no. You don't big league me, buddy. Nobody big leagues me here in South Carolina. And he's gonna tell the judge what to do here. So let's watch this. Let's just enjoy some back and forth for some lawyers. We're so far over time, it's not even funny. Some people are probably annoyed it's going too long. I know I'm one of them. I like to keep it to an hour. We're going to go 2 hours tonight. But let's watch this. So
They
first,
said, "Go search
Harpoolian
Alameda."
does laugh. So watch that.
No, sir.
Is that fun? I'm sorry.
Him addressing me. If I found his question humorous, I'm sorry. I thought it was a funny question. It was a rhetorical question. I asked the court to instruct him not to address me, but the witness. Thank you.
You may proceed.
The judge is just like, everybody done? You may proceed. But I mean, they are not pulling punches. I got to be honest. This Meadows guy, they probably don't like him very much. He doesn't seem very likable to try a case against.
I guess the point was Griffin said they were bending over, one to help, one to do all this.
And this is where Griffin, I think on recross, which we'll watch a second of it, I guess. Why not at this point? It's like, so the suspect is supposed to solve the crime for SLED. SLED couldn't have figured out that they want to go search Alameda. Like, come on, guys. Listen, for those of you that want it to be guilty, I get it. For those of you that are voting guilty, that's fine. But to act like this is a logical argument that, did anybody tell you to go search? Did Alec Murdaugh, the suspect in the case whose family just was brutally murdered tonight, did he tell you to go search Alameda? No. They are bending over backwards. No, he didn't tell you to go search Alameda. It's like, come again? Remind me what your job is. Lead investigator of SLED. Investigating this murder. So you didn't think maybe I should go search Alameda? You didn't ask, can I go search Alameda? Whose job is it? Whose responsibility is it? Not Alec Murdaugh's. He did cooperate. I don't think anybody could say he didn't cooperate in this case. I don't think anybody can say he didn't lie in this case. He cooperated and he lied. But putting that on him is not a good look, in my opinion. Not a good look.
Never mentioned Curtis Smith or anybody else until September, right?
Leading.
Can't be the witness.
No, he did not.
Is it police procedure that the suspect?
Here we go.
Is it police procedure that the suspect of your investigation is supposed to solve the crime?
No, it's not.
It's like, come on, this guy's got to be embarrassed at this point. Laura, it's almost like you hear the state first and then you hear the defense, right? I don't plan on being the defense. Somebody said it's because you're a defense attorney. I've actually been a prosecutor. I've been a defense attorney. Now I don't even do that much criminal work. 99% of what I do is civil. Personal injury cases, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accidents, stuff like that. So you can call me a defense lawyer if you want, but there have been plenty of cases where I'm hammering it from the prosecution side. Been on both sides. This case, to me, is a defense case. I love it. Malice.
But it helps to have information from other sources.
And you were asking a number of what ifs. One what if was like, what if he hid the guns in Alameda? How long would that take? And you said 5 minutes, right?
I said 5 or 10 minutes, depending on if you know the area.
What if you'd gone over there that night and searched Alameda? How long would that have taken?
Quite sometimes, large property.
And we would know today that there were no guns hidden on the property.
Well,
That's a fair question, especially to get animated about. You didn't take the time that night to go search, but you're saying here, oh yeah, he definitely could have hit him. So now you think he could have hit him, but the night when you could have found out yes or no, you didn't think he could have hit him there.
at night, Alec was not considered a main suspect.
He was the only
And I had
suspect
no
ever.
information to go search Alameda for guns.
At what point in time did you ask Alec, did you hide guns at Alameda?
I didn't.
First time that question ever came to you was on February 15th at 4:30 in the afternoon. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I think you testified about item 22, and I just may not have heard you correctly, but and Mr. Greer's testimony will speak for itself, but the results were he can't say it's item 22 is the shotgun that Alec had when Deputy Green came in, but he can't say, he can't exclude it, he can't exclude it, he can't say anything about it.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned what Shelley Smith told you in an interview, I take it. Did she tell you? Did you ever
Yes.
interview Shelley Smith?
Yes, I did.
And you testified that she told you that Alec came over there on June 14th in the morning, right? That's what you testified this year. That's what she told you.
She told me it was the day after Mr. Randolph Murdaugh's funeral.
All right.
Through my research, would have been June 14th.
And you were here in the courtroom when she testified under oath in front of this jury that Alec came over there 3 days later, and it was June the 16th on Wednesday. You heard that testimony, did you?
That's what she said in court, yes.
That was her sworn testimony, correct?
Yes.
That's all the question I had.
You may step down.
Amanda, this is sad and scary to think about, but you're right. I mean, it's wild to think about. All right, we're going to jump to the judge's ruling. I'm not going to get into the cell phone forensic guy very much. We know that Paul's phone was touched or turned off or on at 10:18. Who did that? Did Murdaugh do that? But he called 911 first and said phone popped out and I grabbed it at 10:06. So we'll see if they kind of flesh that out more, but not a ton happened. Taco Supreme, I would love some tacos right now. I would love it. I would love it. Okay, let's listen to the judge's ruling and watch the defense's reaction to the judge's ruling.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
All right, here we go.
With regard to the court's earlier ruling excluding not allowing the roadside shooting incident during cross-examination, I find that the defense opened the door to all of that testimony by questioning the witness as to.
So I wouldn't say full-blown smiles, but I think I will say smirks. Janelle, basically yes.
The relationship between Mr. Murdaugh and Eddie Smith, payment of money to buy drugs, indebtedness, his overall relationship, and in order to not mislead the jury and to, under the doctrine of completeness and fairness, the court reverses its decision and will allow examination of witnesses regarding that relationship. And we'll be in recess till tomorrow morning. 9:30.
Woo. All right, we got 8 minutes to 2 hours. How many questions do you think I can answer in 8 minutes? Let's find out and go rapid fire here. Presented by no sponsor tonight. Janet Moorcraft. How long does the jury deliberate before it's declared a hung jury? Days, weeks? It depends. It's different in every case. I would think at the very least days, if not a full week in a trial that's going to last this long. Hit that like button if anybody's leaving because we're done with the recap and they don't want to hear the questions. That's fine. Hit the like button on your way out. And please subscribe. We got 10,000 people in here. About half of you normally are not subscribed. So hit that subscribe button for me. JP, can Buster testify like Amato at Halderson trials? I don't know what you mean by like Amato, but yes, he can testify. Trish, if AM is found not guilty, will he be released while he waits for the financial crimes? Very unlikely because of his... because of the amount of evidence they have against him, the amount of time he's looking for, the seriousness of the offenses, I still think he'll be sitting in prison waiting for those. Sarah R., if you were a part of the defense, would you state to the jury in closing that if they think AM was involved, but not the shooter, you have to acquit? Or if you think it was spontaneous, you cannot find him guilty of first degree? No, I would not make that argument. Even though I think the first part of this, that if he was involved, but not technically the murderer, could potentially make a good argument, you don't want them to think he's involved at all, especially because your whole case has kind of been built around he loved them, he couldn't do something this brutal. My kid's personal Uber driver, when waiting all day for you, thank you. If the jury thinks he did the things, but someone else did the cleanup, is that a guilty verdict? Yes. People want to put two people there or hired hand there. Is this reasonable thought? Yes. If they think somebody else came cleaned up, but he committed the actual crimes, that's still a conviction. Court K, does law enforcement always lie to a grand jury? Absolutely not. How can they get away with it? I don't know. If that happened where I live, or that happened where I live, it can ruin lives. You better believe it. Paula Graham, Someone handled Paul's gun at 10:18, who also had time after the 911 call when law enforcement got there. I don't know. I don't know this answer. I don't know. Heather, did Paul and Maggie have a vehicle with them? I think they said they could have walked, taken the golf cart, or there was a farm truck there. Brad Walker, question. When discussing the clothes, why not question why someone who admitted to touching them, rolling them over, didn't have more blood on him? I think they have questioned that. I think they've made that kind of a good argument of theirs that, like, listen, we've been testing these clothes, there's no blood. And while that's bad for us to prove, he's the shooter, but if he touched him, why doesn't he have more blood on him? Therese, what would probable cause to arrest him have been? Simply that he was there earlier, that he lied about being there right around the times of the murder, that he was the only person with them and last person with them. What you're seeing in this trial, probably, in my opinion, barely amounts to probable cause, but not beyond a reasonable doubt. Marjorie, do you think the defense has to attack that Snapchat video, either the time of it or the fact that it's him? I think you might sprinkle some doubt on that it's not the exact time that it was uploaded or taken, that there's some leeway there. But also, I think you talk about how it fits in the timeline. It still gave him only 15 minutes-ish to do all this and clean it up. Bethany, do you think anyone would be willing to search the dad's house, especially since he was ill in the hospital? It just seems like he was so respected there. Well, then they don't deserve to win this case. If they're not willing to do their jobs and do a proper investigation, then you shouldn't be trying to convict people beyond a reasonable doubt with no evidence if you weren't willing to go gather the evidence. Leah, didn't Alex change outfits within the timeline between the filming of that tree video and when the first responders arrived, proving he cleaned up? Or that tree video was a couple hours before the Snapchat video, or whatever the video was with the dog wagging its tail. He could have changed in that time period. He said he didn't remember when he changed. Cherie, but yes, he could have cleaned up at that point as well. Cherie Qualls, but why didn't they go find the clothes? Do you predict a hung jury or not guilty? I don't know what I predict at this point. Let's hold off on that. Patrick, could the defense file a motion to dismiss prior to presenting their case for the prosecution not meeting their burden of proof? Lots of questions. It would be a motion for a judgment of acquittal, that no reasonable juror could find this person guilty. They will make that motion. They will lose. My guardian angel, I know you don't follow Cousin Eddie, but can you please tell me why he's not in jail for shooting AM in the head if everyone knows he did it? I have no idea. I'm assuming, based on your comment, he's not in jail. I have no idea why. It doesn't make sense to me. Polly, why is he fighting this case so hard when he's likely to spend the rest of his life in prison for financial crimes anyways? He's covering for someone or something way worse. I think it's one thing to go to prison for stealing from people. I think you want to clear your name on this so that maybe your family members will forgive you or love you. Gab Liz. Peter, is it odd that the prosecution hasn't walked through the scene to explain where and how the shots occurred compared to the location of the casing shells, confused after the ME and where Maggie is? I think they realize they don't have a lot of evidence, so I'll just leave that there. Sawyer, Peter, in your opinion, does Judge Newman allowing the financial evidence in blow the state's chance at convicting the jurors beyond reasonable doubt? Absolutely not. I think it only helps their chances. Bethany, would this have been enough to prove conspiracy? Potentially, but probably not. Jamie, does the judge give the jury any directives before witnesses are called for guidance on what they're supposed to do with all this info? No, there's a charge at the end that they tell them they can weigh the credibility, if they believe it, not believe it, found them believable or not credible or biased for different reasons. Diamonds, if he's found not guilty, is he still going to jail for stealing? Yes. Or is he free? No, he's going to prison forever. Teal Business Services, what would convince you he did it? A video of him shooting them? Reasonable that he is the only one with opportunity? No, but just actual proof that he hid the gun somewhere, or that there was a shred of DNA or blood somewhere, or that they found the guns, or they found the clothes, or that they found blood in the pipes, or that they actually searched the water near where they are, where it's like brown or red or whatever, and there is blood there. Something that proves one of these scenarios actually happened. Doesn't have to be a video of it. D-Rock, can the defense bring in an expert to say AM's opioid use may cause memory loss? I don't think that's going to be helpful to them, especially when he's trying cases for multi-million dollars. Sawyer, do you think AM moved a lot in the interrogation video today, similar to how he is in court, emotional at times? I think so. Michelle, question, if found innocent, could he go after the state for defamation and false accusations? No. Thanks for the nightly recaps. It's very hard to do that. There's immunity when states are when the state is prosecuting these cases because we want justice and we don't want them to be sued every time they lose. Ashley, dumb question. Can the prosecution call Alec Murdaugh? No, just the defense. He has a Fifth Amendment right, and he has to waive that right if he wants to. If the OnStar SGTH, if the OnStar data shows something at Alameda, what are the rules in bringing in new evidence or swabbing DNA at Alameda during the trial? I have heard they're searching for the weapons right now, still. So I guess they're still allowed to bring stuff in. Bebo Cali, would you agree to do a televised trial? Absolutely. I don't think a lot of my clients would because it's personal medical information most of the time. Maria, can they ask if he regrets his bad investigation? Absolutely. But he said in the beginning he doesn't think they blew it. It was part of Griffin's testimony or cross. Deborah B, adding to my last super chat. If AM did not kill his wife and child, he has paid a high price for his past wicked weakness. Oof. The real Sarah. Why has no one mentioned the airstrip? Easy to get in and out in a small plane. I feel like that'd be hard to hide. Green-eyed goals. Guns, clothes were in the white Ford, driven to the kennels instead of the Suburban, not checked to my recollection, taken to Alameda the next morning. I thought they did check the Ford, but again, if it wasn't checked, how are we going to say that this was in there? The state has to prove that to us. The state's got to tell us that and why that's true. Jesse Sue, how different is the money trial going to be compared to this one? Will it be like what we've already shown? Yeah, a lot of that and more. It's going to be a slam dunk. There's more than reasonable doubt for that. Kuda, $50,000 is 3,500 plus oxys a week. Or any other human would be comatose 24/7 with drool running down their chin, let alone he wouldn't be able to lift a gun. I assume they think he was selling some of it or that was a lie and overestimation. I don't know. We're over 2 hours now. I'm going to hit a couple more and then I got to call it. K80. Will AM stay in jail until the next trial? I think so. Oh, if it's a hung jury, absolutely. Get TaylorMade as a sponsor. Carsto, if you know him, if anybody knows a guy or gal at TaylorMade, give them my info. I'd love for them to be a sponsor of the rapid fire questions. Hollyberry. Someone calls Paul's phone to light up a 1018 after a 911 call when he was already said he checked his pulse and he told them not to touch him again. First LE on scene 1026. This cell phone data is not exact. Okay. I'll just leave that there. If you're going to base it all on that, okay, that's fair. It's a piece of evidence. You can consider it. Melissa, do you think the state will rest tomorrow? Yes. Ashley, isn't it weird that all the witnesses get to sit and watch other witnesses testify? It is so weird. And then they comment about that testimony. If the prosecution is smart, should they play the 911? Sorry, Bevstar. If the prosecution is smart, they should play the 911 interviews with regard to the cousin. I believe Alex was paying off his dealers, maybe blackmail or a dealer. Potentially. Deborah B. Conspiracy theory. AM has a whole town prosecution pretending to try to convict him, but actually trying to get him off. I don't think so. I think they want to convict him. Kate, and that's why it's the AG's office. Do you think it doesn't matter that he asked the caregiver to lie about the time he was at his mother's, asked Blanca to say he was wearing a different shirt? Again, I think he was trying to not be a suspect anymore. If you want to take that as consciousness of guilt, I absolutely think that's a plausible and reasonable take from those statements as well. Cynthia, each day, I think the state will bring evidence that we all need to prove guilt. And each day I'm disappointed in why the judge changed the judgment on the side of the road stuff, because he thinks the defense just got way too into it on their good stuff, but the jury didn't get to hear the bad stuff. So under the rule of completeness, it's all coming in now, which is a very interesting way to use the rule of completion. Thank you, Nicole. Attorney Kelly O'Leary. Smith, the roadside shooter has a Fifth Amendment right. Granted use of immunity or worse, transactional immunity, he could be on the hook for roadside crimes, dealing, and a double murder. It'll be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how that goes. It seems like they know what he's going to say, like they've taken his deposition or he's made statements already. So I don't think he's going to get up there and plead the fifth. Mina, he flat out lied about his voice in P's video, said he didn't know who it was, didn't seem innocent to me. Absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. Ben Croker, wild thought. Was it really a murder-suicide? I don't think so. And the medical examiner, that's basically one of the only things she did testify to, is that was not the case. Kirsten, Peter, do you think it's plausible someone assisted, AM fully participated, but also had help? Absolutely. I think that might be the most likely scenario. Taco Supreme, do you think that his father going into hospice set the wheels in motion for Alex, like he just started to lose it? Potentially. I think that's more likely, like his family's falling apart. He has nobody to protect him. Everything's going down. versus like, I don't think he did it for any financial gain or even really the financial crimes. It may have felt like his world was caving in, and this might be a better motive than the financial stuff. Thank you, Lynn Campbell. Sassy Gal Beauty, you work hard for your money. I'm team not guilty based on the evidence. I'm with you for now. All right, last one. Allison, Southern Patty here. Collection County Sheriff and Alex indicted on drug charges with the Cowboys, yet witnesses from SLED haven't heard of them. It's a good point. It's a good point. All right, that's it, folks. 2 hours. I think my longest one ever. Thanks for joining me here. At least I didn't have to crush my voice because we watched a lot of video. I will see you tomorrow. Hit that subscribe button, okay? Hit it if you haven't. Hit the like button on the way out. I love you all. Thanks for hanging with me. Thanks for coming back every night. It's why I come back every night. And I will see you tomorrow.